Rachel Morgan, the commander said, and the entire emergency room seemed to forget how to breathe. It was 3:17 in the morning when 7 Navy SEALs walked through the glass doors of Atlantic Mercy Medical Center, bringing the storm in with them. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of their uniforms. Their boots left clean, deliberate prints across the polished floor. No one raised his voice. No one needed to. The man at the front carried a blackened metal case against his chest, its edges warped by heat and age. Behind him, another man held a folded American flag with both hands, careful and steady, as if the cloth weighed more than anything else in the building. The security officer stepped forward, one palm raised. "Gentlemen, visiting hours ended at 9. Who are you here to see?" The commander did not look at the officer. His eyes moved past the nurse's station, past the waiting families, past Dr. Andrew Whitaker standing beneath the trauma board with a chart in his hand. "Rachel Morgan," he repeated. Susan Miller, the charge nurse, glanced at the staff roster on her monitor. "Rachel?" she asked. "She's one of our new nurses." The commander's expression did not change. "Not to us." Through the narrow window of Trauma Bay 3, Rachel stood beneath white fluorescent light, washing a thin streak of dried blood from her forearm. She wore pale blue scrubs one size too large, white sneakers, and a plastic identification badge that read Rachel Morgan, RN. Nothing about her looked important. Nothing about her suggested that 7 highly trained men had crossed the state in a storm to find her. Her ash blonde hair was tied into a simple knot. Her face was calm, almost tired. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to being overlooked. Then she looked up. Her eyes found the metal case first. For 1 second, the hand beneath the running water stopped. Commander Luke Barrett saw it. So did every man behind him. The reaction was almost invisible, but it was enough. Barrett lowered the case onto the nurse's station. The metal made a soft, heavy sound that carried through the ER. Conversations faded. A monitor continued its steady rhythm somewhere down the hall. Rachel turned off the faucet, dried her hands, and stepped out of the trauma bay. Dr. Whitaker moved into her path. "Morgan, you still have charts to finish." She looked past him at Barrett. The commander removed his cap. One by one, the others did the same. Rachel's expression remained still, but the color had left her face. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was barely louder than the rain against the windows. Barrett placed one hand on the burned lid of the case. "We should have come years ago." Susan looked from the flag to the commander, then back to the quiet rookie nurse she had trained for 3 weeks. "Rachel," she whispered, "who are these men?" Rachel did not answer. Barrett did. Were the men she brought home. 8 hours earlier, Dr. Whitaker had recommended that Atlantic Mercy fire her before the end of her first month. 8 hours earlier, Atlantic Mercy Medical Center had looked less like a hospital and more like a ship trying to stay upright in a storm. Rain pressed against the reinforced windows and silver sheets, and every few minutes the wind made the glass tremble inside its frame. Fluorescent lights hummed above crowded hallways lined with wheelchairs, supply carts, and families waiting for news they were afraid to hear. The air carried the sharp smell of disinfectant, burned coffee, and wet coats. Monitors sounded from behind curtains. Phones rang without pause. Nurses moved quickly, doctors spoke too loudly, and no one had enough time. Rachel Morgan stood at the end of the main corridor with a clipboard tucked against her side, watching everything without appearing to watch anything. She had been at Atlantic Mercy for 3 weeks, long enough for people to recognize her face, but not long enough for anyone to remember much about her. She wore pale blue scrubs, plain white shoes, and her ash blonde hair tied into the same practical knot she wore every shift. She did not complain about the schedule. She did not join conversations at the nurse's station. She did not correct anyone when they assumed she was nervous. Rachel simply worked. She checked medication labels twice, noticed changes in breathing before machines, announced them, and somehow arrived at patient rooms seconds before call lights turned on. Susan Miller had begun calling it good instinct. Dr. Andrew Whitaker called it luck. Neither of them noticed that Rachel counted the steps between every treatment bay and the nearest exit. Neither saw the way her eyes moved to a stranger's hands before his face. When a metal tray struck the floor behind her with a sudden crash, 3 people jumped. Rachel did not even blink. She turned, confirmed that no one was hurt, and continued writing. A few minutes later, she paused beside the ambulance entrance. Beyond the doors, thunder rolled over Norfolk, but Rachel tilted her head as though listening for something beneath it. Susan approached with 2 paper cups. "Coffee?" she asked. Rachel accepted one. "Thank you." Susan followed her gaze toward the storm. "What is it?" Rachel waited. 5 seconds later, a distant mechanical rhythm passed through the rain. Heavy rotor blades. Fast approach. Rachel looked away before the sound became clear to anyone else. "Nothing," she said. "Probably Coast Guard traffic." Susan stared through the glass. "I could not hear anything." Rachel took a small sip of coffee. "You will." Less than a minute later, a helicopter crossed above the hospital roof, low enough to shake dust from the upper window frames. Susan looked back at Rachel, but Rachel was already walking toward room 12, where a patient had begun breathing too quickly. At the doorway, she adjusted her sleeve, briefly exposing a pale scar along her wrist. It curved around the skin in 3 narrow lines, almost like a wave beneath a broken trident. She covered it at once. Across the corridor, Dr. Whitaker watched her enter the room without being called. His expression hardened. By the end of the hour, he would decide that Rachel Morgan was not cautious, not gifted, and not worth the trouble. He would decide she needed to be taught her place. Before midnight, that decision would nearly cost him his career. Dr. Andrew Whitaker found Rachel in room 12 with one hand resting on the patient's wrist and the other adjusting the oxygen line. The man in the bed had arrived with what looked like a minor stomach complaint, but Rachel had noticed the change in his skin before the monitor showed anything unusual. His breathing had become shallow. His pulse was faster than it had been 10 minutes earlier. A faint gray color had appeared around his mouth. "His pressure is falling," Rachel said. Whitaker glanced at the screen. "It is still within range." "Not for him." Whitaker looked toward the hallway, where 2 members of the hospital quality committee were walking with the nursing director. They had come to observe the department during the storm, and Whitaker had been careful all evening to appear calm, efficient, and completely in control. Rachel's quiet challenge landed at the worst possible moment. "Morgan, step outside." She followed him into the corridor. Susan Miller was standing nearby with a medication cart, close enough to hear every word. Whitaker lowered his voice, but not enough to make the conversation private. "You have been here 3 weeks. You do not change priorities, question attending physicians, or enter rooms without being assigned." Rachel kept her hands loosely at her sides. "His condition changed. You are not qualified to make that determination." His pulse increased by 22 beats per minute. His abdomen is more rigid, and he is becoming confused. Whitaker's jaw tightened. The nursing director and the committee members had stopped several feet away. "This is exactly the problem," he said. "You act as though you have experience that does not appear anywhere in your employment record." Rachel said nothing. "Until further notice, you are removed from trauma intake. You will change linens, restock supplies, and assist with patient transport. At the end of this shift, I will recommend that your probationary employment be reviewed." Susan stepped forward. "Dr. Whitaker, she may be right about that patient." "Stay out of this, Susan." Rachel turned to Susan. "It is fine." The words were soft, almost automatic. She removed the trauma pager from her waistband and placed it on the counter. Then she walked toward the supply room without defending herself. Whitaker watched her go with the satisfied expression of a man who believed order had been restored. Behind him, the monitor in room 12 changed its rhythm. The patient called weakly for help. Susan moved first. Rachel was already turning around. She crossed the corridor without running, reached the bedside, and lowered the head of the bed. "Call for imaging and bring the emergency cart," she said. Whitaker entered behind her. "Morgan, I told you to leave this case." Rachel looked at the patient's face, then at the small change in the shape of his abdomen. "He is bleeding internally." Whitaker began to object, but the blood pressure reading dropped sharply. The patient's eyes lost focus. The room filled with staff. Rachel gave clear instructions, each one calm and precise, preparing the man for immediate treatment before Whitaker had finished processing what had happened. 10 minutes later, the patient was on his way to surgery, and the quality committee was no longer looking at Rachel. They were looking at Whitaker. A young resident approached her near the elevators. "How did you know?" Rachel pulled a clean sheet over an empty stretcher. "The body tells you," she said. Before he could ask what that meant, the communications radio at the nurse's station released a burst of static. A voice cut through on a restricted Navy priority channel. "Atlantic Mercy, Prepare for military medical intake. Multiple patients inbound. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. Rachel stopped moving. For the first time that night, Susan saw fear in her eyes. The fear lasted less than a second. Then Rachel Morgan became still. How many patients? Dr. Whitaker asked the radio operator. The answer came through a wall of static. For confirmed. 1 critical. Naval helicopter inbound from the coast. Estimated arrival, 11 minutes. The emergency department changed at once. Curtains were pulled back. Supply carts rolled into position. Susan Miller began assigning rooms while the nursing director called for additional staff. Whitaker stepped into the center of the corridor and raised his voice. Trauma Bay 1 for the critical patient. 2 and 3 for the others. Morgan, stay with transport duties. Rachel did not answer. She was staring at the radio. The operator repeated the incoming report. Primary patient is Petty Officer Cole Ramsey, age 31. Unresponsive after a training aircraft made an emergency landing near the shoreline. Possible chest injury, unstable blood pressure, irregular breathing. Rachel's fingers tightened around the clean sheet in her hands. Cole Ramsey. The name was unfamiliar, but the phrase that followed was not. Unit identification is restricted. Medical liaison will provide access code Black Harbor 7. The corridor seemed to narrow around her. Susan noticed the change. Rachel, where is the helicopter landing? Rachel asked. Roof pad, Susan said. Why? Rachel was already moving toward Trauma Bay 1. Whitaker stepped in front of her. I gave you an assignment. You need the warming unit, portable ultrasound, and 2 additional units of emergency blood ready before he arrives. We have a standard military intake protocol. This will not be standard. Whitaker's expression hardened. You are done making predictions tonight. Rachel met his eyes. Then prepare to be surprised. She walked past him before he could respond. 10 minutes later, the sound of rotor blades shook the upper floors. The elevator doors opened, and a medical team rushed into the emergency department with 4 patients. 2 were alert. 1 was dazed but stable. The 4th lay beneath a thermal blanket, surrounded by equipment and Navy personnel wearing rain-darkened jackets. A silver chain rested against the patient's neck. Attached to it was a small metal tag marked with a faded symbol, 3 waves beneath a broken trident. Rachel stopped beside the stretcher. The same symbol curved faintly beneath the sleeve covering her wrist. Blood pressure is falling, the flight medic reported. We stabilized him twice during transport, but something is wrong with his breathing. The aircraft damage does not match the medical findings. Whitaker moved to the patient's right side. Take him into Bay 1. Rachel looked at the man's boots. The salt dried along the edge of his clothing, and the narrow dark line around one wrist where a watch had recently been removed. Her gaze shifted to the Navy liaison. Where is the flight recorder? The liaison stared at her. That information is restricted. Then this was not only an emergency landing. Whitaker turned sharply. Morgan, leave the bay. Rachel ignored him. She examined the damaged patch on Cole's shoulder. Part of the fabric had burned away, but 1 stitched number remained visible. 7. Cole's hand moved weakly beneath the blanket. His fingers found Rachel's wrist and closed around it with surprising certainty. His eyes opened only slightly. He did not call her nurse. He did not ask where he was. He whispered one word that had not been spoken to her in years. Haven. The Navy liaison went pale. Who are you? Rachel gently released Cole's hand. Right now, she said. I am the person telling you that this was not an accident. The Navy liaison did not answer Rachel. He looked toward Dr. Whitaker instead, as though the question had come from someone who did not belong in the room. This patient is under military authority, he said. Your staff will provide treatment and nothing more. Rachel studied Cole Ramsey without reacting. The thermal blanket had been folded back, revealing a uniform marked by rain, salt, and a thin streak of hydraulic fluid near the shoulder. His breathing remained uneven. The monitor showed a pattern that did not fit the story they had been given. His left side is not moving correctly, she said. Whitaker reached for the stethoscope. I can see that. Then ask why the flight medic heard equal breath sounds 6 minutes ago. Whitaker paused. The flight medic looked at Rachel. How did you know that? Because you would not have transported him this way if the problem had started at the shoreline. She placed 2 fingers against Cole's neck, counting silently. His pulse changed beneath her hand. Not weaker. Interrupted. Something shifted during the flight, she said. Portable imaging now. Whitaker gave the order, making it sound like his own. Susan brought the equipment into the bay while the Navy liaison stepped closer to Rachel. You heard a restricted code over the radio. You recognized the unit patch. Now he called you Haven. I am asking again. Who are you? Rachel kept her eyes on the screen as the image appeared. That is not the important question. A narrow shadow moved near Cole's upper chest. It was small, easy to miss, and positioned too precisely to be random debris. Rachel pointed to it. That object was not caused by the landing. Whitaker leaned toward the monitor. It could be part of the aircraft. Aircraft fragments do not arrive wrapped in medical polymer. The liaison's face changed. Rachel had not raised her voice, but the room became quieter around her. Susan glanced at the damaged patch, then at the pale scar hidden beneath Rachel's sleeve. Someone placed it there? She asked. Rachel nodded once. It may be transmitting, recording, or interfering with his equipment. Until we know which, no wireless devices remain in this room. Whitaker frowned. You cannot shut down hospital systems based on a guess. Rachel looked at him. It is not a guess. Cole's heart rhythm shifted again. Rachel reached beneath the blanket and disconnected a small monitoring lead that had arrived with the military transport equipment. The irregular pattern immediately eased. The flight medic stared at the lead. A tiny black component had been attached beneath the adhesive strip. It was smaller than a shirt button. The liaison removed his radio from his belt, but did not activate it. Seal the bay, he ordered. No one enters or leaves. Rachel turned toward Susan. Move the other 3 patients to separate rooms. Do not let their transport gear connect to the hospital network. Susan did not ask how Rachel knew. She simply moved. Whitaker remained beside the monitor, his confidence thinning with every second. Morgan, he said, quieter now. What exactly are we dealing with? Rachel examined Cole's wrist. The missing watch had left a clean band against weathered skin. Along the edge of that mark was a faint blue stain used by one military tracking system that officially did not exist. She had seen it once before, years ago, during the operation that ended her career. Someone wanted the aircraft found, she said. But they did not want Cole Ramsey able to explain why. The overhead lights flickered. Across the emergency department, every monitor went dark for one silent second. When power returned, the Navy liaison's secure radio came alive by itself. A man's voice spoke through the speaker. Haven is confirmed at Atlantic Mercy. Rachel slowly turned toward the locked trauma bay door. Whoever had arranged the emergency already knew she was there. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then every alarm in Atlantic Mercy began sounding at once. The emergency lights shifted to red, the main monitors rebooted, and a sharp burst of static rolled through the ceiling speakers. Somewhere beyond Trauma Bay 1, a nurse called out that 2 elevators had stopped between floors. Another voice reported that the backup generator was carrying only part of the building. Dr. Andrew Whitaker looked toward the control panel, then toward the locked door, as if one of them might explain what he was supposed to do. Rachel Morgan did not wait. Susan, move all stable patients to the west corridor. Keep them away from military equipment. Use only wired monitors. Susan Miller nodded and left immediately. Rachel turned to the Navy liaison. Shut down every secure radio in this department. I cannot do that without authorization. Then get authorization while you are doing it. The liaison hesitated. Rachel's voice changed. It was not louder. It was sharper, stripped of every trace of uncertainty. Now, he switched off the radio. Across the emergency department, staff members began shouting conflicting instructions. A respiratory therapist asked where to move oxygen tanks. A resident called for additional power in Trauma Bay 2. The nursing director tried to organize the hallway but could not hear over the alarms. Rachel stepped out of Cole Ramsey's room and took one look at the corridor. Critical patients to the east side, she said. Stable patients west. Keep the center aisle clear. Portable oxygen goes to rooms 4 and 6. No wireless equipment enters the military base. People obeyed before they understood why. Whitaker followed her into the hall. Morgan, you are not in charge here. Rachel looked at him. Then take charge. He opened his mouth, but another monitor failed behind him. Hey. Patient needed immediate attention. 2 orderlies were blocking the main passage with a supply cart. The Navy patients had been placed too close together. Whitaker saw the same chaos Rachel had already organized in her mind, and for the first time that night, he had no answer. Move the cart, Rachel ordered. Susan, assign one nurse to every military patient. Dr. Whitaker, Cole needs you in Bay 1. I will manage triage. Whitaker stared at her for half a second, then turned and did exactly what she said. Rachel moved through the department with measured speed. She redirected staff, checked every power connection, and separated the equipment that might have been compromised. Her instructions came in clean, simple sentences. Keep that door closed. Use the manual cuff. Bring the emergency battery. Do not connect that device. The fear that Susan had seen earlier was gone. In its place was something colder. Familiarity. This was not the behavior of a nurse improvising under pressure. It was the behavior of someone returning to a place she had spent years trying to forget. The Navy liaison watched her coordinate the entire floor. Where did you learn to command like that? He asked. Rachel did not look at him. Somewhere with worse lighting. A hospital telephone rang at the nurse's station. Susan answered, listened, then covered the receiver. Rachel, there is a Navy officer on the line. He says he heard your voice on the emergency channel. Rachel stopped. What does he want? Susan's face tightened. He ordered the hospital locked down. No one enters. No one leaves. Before Rachel could respond, the outer security doors sealed with a heavy mechanical sound. The Navy liaison turned toward her. That order came from Naval Special Warfare Command. Rachel looked through the rain-streaked glass toward the dark landing pad above. Then they know who is coming. The lockdown changed the emergency department faster than the power failure had. Security officers moved to the main entrance. The nursing director demanded answers. Families looked toward the sealed doors while staff members whispered about Naval Special Warfare Command. Rachel Morgan remained in the center corridor, watching the upper windows where the landing pad lights flashed through the rain. She knew the order was not meant to protect the hospital from something outside. It was meant to keep someone inside. The Navy liaison stepped in front of her. You will come with me. Rachel did not move. Cole Ramsey is still unstable. Dr. Whitaker can manage him. Then let him. Whitaker emerged from Trauma Bay 1, removing his gloves. His rhythm is steady for now, but I want to know why the Navy just locked down my department because of a probationary nurse. The liaison looked directly at Rachel. The restricted channel identified her by a classified call sign. She recognized compromised equipment before our security team did. She also issued operational instructions using language associated with a unit that officially has no public record. Whitaker's expression changed from confusion to suspicion. Her employment file does not show military service. I noticed, the liaison said. Susan Miller stepped closer. That does not mean she has done anything wrong. Whitaker ignored her. Rachel, did you falsify your application? Rachel looked through the glass at Cole. His breathing had settled, but only because the room around him had finally become quiet and controlled. No. Then explain how you know any of this. I cannot. You mean you will not? Rachel turned toward him. Both. The nursing director arrived with 2 security officers and held out her hand. Until this is resolved, I need your identification badge. Susan started to object, but Rachel stopped her with a small shake of the head. She unclipped the badge from her scrub top and placed it in the director's palm. The plastic card looked ordinary. Her photograph, her name, her nursing credentials. Nothing that explained the reaction of the Navy officer or the call sign spoken over a secure channel. Whitaker folded his arms. You were suspended from patient care. Rachel nodded once. No defense. No argument. She stepped away from the nurse's station and stood beside the sealed entrance, as if waiting for something she already understood. The rain intensified against the glass. Then the outer camera feed returned. 7 men stood beneath the covered entrance in dark uniforms, their faces turned toward the door. One carried a scorched metal case. Another held a folded American flag. The security officer checked the authorization code and immediately unlocked the first barrier. The men entered without hurry. Their boots crossed the wet floor in a straight line. The hospital staff fell silent as they passed. Commander Luke Barrett led them through the second security door. He was taller than Rachel remembered, with silver at his temples and the same controlled expression he had worn years ago when every decision mattered. His eyes found her before anyone spoke. Whitaker stepped forward. This area is restricted. Who authorized your entry? Barrett did not look at him. Naval Special Warfare Command. The liaison straightened. The security officers moved aside. Barrett stopped 6 feet from Rachel and removed his cap. The men behind him did the same. For the first time that night, Rachel looked uncertain. "Luke," she said. He studied the pale blue scrubs, the white shoes, and the empty place where her hospital badge had been. "You always did choose the hardest way to disappear." Whitaker looked from one face to another. "Commander, this woman is a nurse under investigation." Barrett finally turned toward him. "No, doctor. This woman is Lieutenant Rachel Morgan." The room went completely still. Barrett faced her again. "Haven, your unit has come home." For several seconds, the only sound in Atlantic Mercy was the rain striking the windows. Rachel Morgan stood without her badge, surrounded by people who had spent the entire night deciding who she was. Commander Luke Barrett and the 6 men behind him already knew. Barrett stepped closer, but Rachel kept her distance. "You were told I was gone," she said. "We were told you were dead," he replied. Dr. Andrew Whitaker looked toward the Navy liaison. "Is any of this verified?" The liaison had already entered a code into his secure tablet. His expression changed as the file opened. "Her civilian record is protected under federal authority," he said. "Most of her service history is sealed." Whitaker stared at Rachel. "She told this hospital she had no military background." "She told you what she was legally permitted to tell you," Barrett said. He turned toward the staff gathered along the corridor. "Rachel Morgan served with our unit under the call sign Haven. She was not assigned to stand behind us. She was the person we followed when every normal plan had failed." Rachel's eyes remained on the scorched metal case. "Luke, do not do this here. There was never going to be a private place large enough for what we owe you." One by one, the men behind him stepped forward. They were older than the faces Rachel remembered. Some carried gray at their temples. One walked with a slight stiffness in his right leg. Another wore a wedding ring that had not existed years ago. They had built lives after the night she believed had ended all of theirs. Barrett faced the room again. "During Operation Black Harbor, our team became trapped inside a flooded coastal facility after the evacuation route failed. Communications were gone. Power was failing. The structure was closing around us. Lieutenant Morgan found a second route through service tunnels that were not listed on any map." Rachel lowered her gaze. Barrett continued. "She moved every injured man to safety, maintained our medical support, restored communication, and returned for the last team member after the extraction officer ordered her to leave." Susan Miller covered her mouth. The nursing director looked down at Rachel's plastic badge still resting in her hand. Whitaker said nothing. "She was not assigned to bring us home," Barrett said. "She chose to." The 7 men formed a straight line in the center of the emergency department. Barrett raised his hand in salute. The others followed. No one spoke. Rachel did not return the salute at first. She seemed smaller beneath the fluorescent lights, not because the men diminished her, but because the weight of their gratitude had finally reached her. Then her shoulders straightened. The quiet rookie nurse disappeared. Lieutenant Rachel Morgan raised her hand with precise, practiced control. The Navy liaison stood at attention. Susan began to cry silently. Even Whitaker lowered his eyes. When the salute ended, Barrett placed the scorched case on the nurse's station. "We found this 6 months ago," he said. "It was recovered from the section that collapsed after you disappeared." Rachel touched the blackened edge with 2 fingers. "You should have left it buried." "We almost did." Barrett released the latches. "Then we found the recording." Rachel's hand stopped. For the first time since the unit arrived, she looked frightened. Barrett opened the lid. Inside lay a tarnished trident, 7 unit coins, and a small waterproof recorder marked with the name Daniel Pierce. Rachel stepped back as though the past had spoken before the device was even turned on. Rachel stared at the recorder as if it were more dangerous than anything else in the room. Commander Luke Barrett pressed the power button. For a moment, there was only static, followed by the distant sound of water and failing machinery. Then a man's voice emerged, weak but unmistakably calm. "If this reaches the team, tell Haven she did not leave me." Rachel closed her eyes. Susan Miller watched the color drain from her face. The recording continued. She followed the mission. She saved the others. That was the order, and it was the right call. Daniel Pierce paused, breathing slowly. "Rachel, you brought them home. Do not spend the rest of your life pretending that means you failed." No one in the emergency department moved. Dr. Andrew Whitaker stood near the nurse's station with Rachel's plastic identification badge still visible in the nursing director's hand. The simple card seemed almost absurd now. Rachel Morgan, registered nurse. 3 weeks of employment. No military history. No explanation for the men standing at attention around her. The recorder clicked, then Daniel's voice returned. One more thing. Black Harbor was never the end of your story. Stop letting it be. The message ended. Rachel opened her eyes, but she did not look at anyone. Her attention remained on the tarnished trident inside the case. You found him? She asked. Barrett answered carefully. We found the compartment where he recorded that message. We did not find Daniel. Rachel's hand closed around the edge of the nurse's station. Then you do not know. No, Barrett said. We did not know. Not until 6 months ago. He placed 6-unit coins beside the recorder, then took a 7th coin from his pocket. Unlike the others, it was clean, recently polished, and marked with a small line through the number 7. The 6 men behind me were at Black Harbor, he said. He nodded toward the final man in formation. Chief Mason leads Cole Ramsey's current team. He came because what happened tonight is connected to the same program that targeted us years ago. Rachel looked toward Trauma Bay 1. Cole was sent here because someone knew I would recognize the signs. Yes. Barrett placed the 7th coin in her palm. And because someone wanted you found. The elevator at the far end of the corridor chimed. Every security officer turned. The doors opened slowly. A man stood inside wearing a dark civilian coat, one hand resting on a cane. His hair had gone mostly gray, and a pale scar crossed the side of his face. But Rachel recognized the way he held his shoulders before she recognized anything else. The trident slipped from her fingers and landed softly inside the case. Daniel Pierce stepped out of the elevator. He stopped several feet away. You always were difficult to locate, Haven. Rachel did not move. For years, she had imagined this moment in dreams that ended before he reached her. Now he was standing beneath the fluorescent lights of Atlantic Mercy, older, alive, and looking at her with the same quiet patience she remembered. I heard the recording, she said. Good, Daniel replied. I was tired of repeating myself. A small, broken laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Daniel crossed the remaining distance and held out his hand. Rachel looked at it, then pulled him into a brief embrace. Around them, 7 men lowered their heads. Susan wiped her eyes. Whitaker looked away, unable to meet Rachel's gaze. When she finally stepped back, the nursing director approached and returned her badge. Nurse Morgan, she said, I believe this belongs to you. Rachel clipped it onto her scrubs. She picked up the 7th coin, placed it in her pocket, and turned toward Trauma Bay 1. Cole Ramsey still needed her. The past had found her, but for the first time, it had not come to take anything away.